Julia.
So, welcome everyone. My name is Maria Ferrer, and I am pleased to announce that tonight's publishing chat is hosted by Las Comadres para las Américas and Latinx in Publishing. Okay, we're going to be discussing Atria Books' new imprint, Primero Sueño Press. Before we introduce our guests, who many of you know, we just have a couple of housekeeping announcements. Please keep yourselves on mute. If you have a comment, a question, please put them in the chat and we will try to get to them. A couple of people already sent us questions, so I've inputted them in with my questions.
Oh, Maria, sorry to interrupt real quick. It said
No,
they
absolutely.
say that the cameras are disabled for the
Yeah, I
session.
disabled them for now until. Do you want them to come on camera? I can enable them.
We disabled the cameras and that way because sometimes people walk or they move, and so they will be distracting. So everybody is sort of like just with their little avatar. And then we'll turn you on later. We're hoping that at the end, I'm gonna get us started with some questions, and then at the end, Michelle wants to hear, your questions live. So we're going to turn everybody on at the end, okay? If we have time, of course. Depending on how much chatting, if we, just keep talking and keep talking, but we'll see. We'll have fun. Okay, so let me get started here with my questions. Okay, so Primero Sueño Press was launched this February 28th and is led by Michelle Herrera Mulligan, who is Vice President and Associate Publisher at Atria Books. The imprint's mission is to publish Latinx and Hispanic authors from the United States in English and in Spanish, with the aim of elevating their voices and bringing them to new audiences. Okay. Before we start on the publishing questions, Comadre Yolanda asks, personally, how did you get into publishing? What drew you to publishing?
Oh, me to publishing in general. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. So oh gosh, I have to rewind the tape from a long time ago, but I think that ever since I was a little girl, to be honest with you, my first love has been books. It was when I was 5 or 6 years old, actually. I asked my father, like, what do you have to do to have something to do with this beautiful thing, which was a book in front of me. And it's always been in my mind. I went to school, to college, University of Missouri, to get into journalism, though, because initially my aim was to be a magazine writer and editor, and I was able to do so. I was very fortunate to be able to work for several magazines, and including starting my own magazine within the Cosmopolitan brand. But to rewind before that, when I was in my 20s, I was working as a fact checker at InStyle magazine, and I remember my dear friend Robin Moreno, and Nora knows the story well, and I just were so frustrated because we had worked at Latina magazine right when it started back in 1997. It's actually launched in 96, but a year after we were working for them. And we got to be in this incredible world of people who were talking about Latino issues, which to me was so foreign because at that time there was nothing. I mean, this was before social media. So just to be able to work on a magazine like that was a huge privilege. But what bothered us was that we took one step out of that office and you didn't see us anywhere, in any books, in any place, actually. So we decided we wanted to do our own book to tell our own stories, the ones that we couldn't even get past the gatekeepers at the magazines. And it was called Borderline Personalities. We published it on Rayo, which was a Latino imprint that was around at the time, published by the great Renee Alegria. And, it just kind of went from there. We didn't get paid very much money, and we worked really, really hard. As Nora knows, we traveled to 20 cities, and thanks to Nora and Las Comadres, we actually got launched in Austin really beautifully. But, going from there, it was kind of a game of just meeting people, going to meetings. I met Johanna Casillo, who was an editor at Atria at the time, and it was really a match made in heaven because we still work together to this day. But we didn't work together for a long time. I ended up editing books for her on the side because she was so busy with she had so many books. It was a new imprint. Atria launched in 2007. So I guess my real sort of soft start was working as an editor for Atria, just as a freelancer while I was doing all my magazine work.
What? And you're still there.
And I
Yeah,
know
it's home. It's still home. It's still home.
It was funny. I left. I mean, I did that for a few years. I ended up working back in magazines for a good 10 years after that, and then somehow found myself back in these office, and it does feel like home.
Yes, yes. And now you are the publisher.
I
You
know.
get
Can you believe it?
to make decisions. So tell us about this new imprint, Primero Sueño Press. How did that come about?
Yes, absolutely. So coming into Atria in 2018, I wasn't doing anything related to books. Actually, I was doing mostly public speaking, and I was working on, oh gosh, it's like seems so long ago now, but I was working on various different projects outside of the book world. So when I came into the book world formally, it felt kind of weird because I just, I was reluctant, to be honest with you, because I didn't like the way that the book world was handling Latine issues or any like diverse voices. I mean, this was before pre-George Floyd and pre that big moment, and I felt like it wasn't even a priority. This is me looking in from the outside because I felt like there were less books than there were back in those days when I was publishing my books. And when I was working, I worked for Publishers Weekly. I worked for a lot of different places, and I felt like there were whole magazines dedicated to talking about Spanish language books back then. And now it just felt like there was nothing. So that dearth made me very reluctant because I know that I'm a very outspoken person. And I was like, I don't know if y'all are going to be ready for this, just to put it that way. And sure enough, even when I interviewed, it was really interesting because Johanna had left and she had recommended me to come in. But I interviewed with John Karp, who is now the CEO of, he was not the CEO then of Simon & Schuster. He was a publisher of one of the imprints of Simon & Schuster. But I didn't take it really seriously. I sort of told him, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I want this job. That was my opener. I don't recommend it, but I just was I just was saying to him that I didn't feel like whatever traditional routes were available made sense to me. And he was really open to that idea, to my surprise. And I said, well, we'll see how it goes. Anyway, to fast forward through my first years there, I wasn't hired to do Latino books in any kind of way. I was just hired to be an editor at Atria and to just publish books that I wanted to publish that I thought I could make work. So I published a lot of different books from by a lot of different ethnicities of people. But of course, my heart was always going to be with my own, communities who are still the most underrepresented. And I was able to publish some books, but I didn't go in, and even Atria Espanol, which still existed, I didn't invest a ton of time and equity in because I just felt like if it's just going to be me and like one other person or someone we have to hire from the outside, that just doesn't make sense. I can't scale and I can't do anything impactful that I really want to do, to be really brutally honest with you. So, it ended up, but every, year or two, John would come to me and say, we're not doing a good enough job with this community. And what do you think we should do better? And then I would come up with a plan and we would talk about it, but just nothing seemed to really take off the way I would like. I'll put it that way. So, when we were sold by, Paramount and CBS, I was really nervous about that moment because I thought who's going to buy us? And then of course there was a bid from Penguin Random House and everybody knows what happened there. The Justice Department ruled that couldn't happen because it would be sort of a monopoly of sorts. They use a different word, but anyway, we ended up being bought by a private equity firm, KKR. So when that happened, I didn't know what to expect, to be honest with you. I had no idea. I just felt like, is this going to mean we're going to be cut down? What's it going to mean? But what it ended up meaning was that they were wanting to do investments and they wanted to make investments in communities that were underserved. And the reason why they wanted to make those investments was because they saw profit and growth there. And that part was really exciting. For us to be posed in that way, when I'd heard over and over again that we don't buy books, that we don't do this and we don't do that. But
we don't read.
We don't read, all the things. but for their, and it wasn't that I was talking directly with them. I had yet another one of my conversations with John, but this time the tone was different. He was saying that there was an opportunity for investment. So what could we do if we had that? And when he said that, I was just saying, well, there should be a whole departments and there should be marketing publicity people and there should be this and there should be that. And he said, sure, and you should lead them. And I was like, what? But and I wasn't expecting him to say that. I really wasn't. But when he did, you know, that's when the opportunity opened up. And in looking for the title, what would we call it? What would it look like? I was, you know, I get a little emotional because for me, one of the writers that, oh gosh, I didn't expect this, that really moved my life was sort of Juana Inez de la Cruz. I don't know if you know who she is. She was a Mexican nun. And when I was in college in Missouri and there was nobody, there were no writers even to read that were Hispanic. That was the one book that they had was Sor Juana. And I read her poetry and I thought, geez, there's this woman who's writing to me across hundreds of years.
Decades,
And
yes.
and she
Right.
wrote this poem called Primero Sueño. And that was the only poem that she wrote ever that represented her true dreams and what she said when she had a chance, because what she wrote, the rest of the poems she wrote were just for revenue, but this one she wrote for herself. And it meant, you know, before we can achieve anything, we have to dream. And I thought, boy, this is hard what we're going to do, but I have to dream like she did. So that's why I called it Primero Sueño Press.
Oh, beautiful. So how big a staff do you have? Now we want to know how many staff you have.
Thank you, Aurora. I see my beautiful friend Aurora has signed on. Okay, I was able to hire 2 editors, which was really, really cool because usually new imprints, it's just you and one other person, but they allowed me to hire 2 people. So I have Norma Perez Hernandez, a
Oh, I
wonderful,
love her. Mhm.
yeah, she's the best. And I have Yesanira Venecia, who is an incredible editor as well. She's edited a lot in Spanish and in English and has done a lot of literary fiction. She worked at Soho Press and also Jabberwocky, an agency. She was working for an agency when I brought her on. She's hit the ground running. She's been absolutely incredible. So I've hired the 2 of them. So it's the 3 of us that are going to be doing the acquiring. We're still in the process of hiring a marketer and publicist. It's taken some time because we really want to find the right team, but we're really narrowing in on the right people now. Because what I want to do with these folks is not just market to the Atlantic and the New Yorker and all those kind of places, because that's the whole problem, right? It's like, why market to places that don't even cover our communities? You know, I'd much rather reach the grassroots community organizations that are speaking to us every day, the influencers in Spanish and English who are talking about our work, the Spanish language publications, the radio shows, how about the entire city of Los Angeles? You know, I mean, I just feel like these are all places that go very underserved by my industry. And we have to create bridges to get to our communities. And we need people with big vision to do that. And we've been working on some really big initiatives, but which I can't really speak to yet because they're not signed off on. But I'm thinking big with this because I don't just want someone who's going to write a few emails here and there. I want to create a legacy for the people that come after me to be able to reach over that bridge and reach our communities.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So what genres are you looking at?
Well, we're looking at a whole bunch of different genres. I would say, I'm glad you mentioned the word genre because in fiction, that's really where we're going to live. I mean, we will publish horror, romance, even fantasy and sci-fi, but in a way that's really accessible because we're not really in the business of trying to pitch to small niche audiences. We want to reach the broadest audience possible. So I would say, you know, romantasy, all of those worlds, as long as there is a commercial and accessible aspect to them, if that makes sense. I'm trying to think. I mean, there's so many genres that exist. Like it's more like what we don't publish is what I'd probably easier to speak to because
So is
we're
there something that you're not going to publish?
right, exactly. I would say what we're not going to publish is anything that really dwells heavily on toxic masculinity, assault, war, books about war in general they're just not really my jam. I don't think that's what people are looking for right now, like extreme violence. I mean, I think when I talk about horror, I'm thinking more like supernatural horror or those kinds of horror.
Gothic thrillers,
Gothic
stuff like that.
thrillers, absolutely. Upmarket, book club fiction, historical fiction, very important for us.
Yes, yeah,
Commercial
yeah.
women, they call it women's fiction. I just call it fiction. I mean, who do you even read anything anymore? Sorry to any men who may be here. But I just feel like books, all the upmarket and commercial space is really where we're going to focus. I think that literary fiction is certainly welcome as well, when it's the right type of book that we really feel like we have an avenue to break it out. And also, to be clear, we're not only publishing authors from the United States. We are publishing Latin American authors as well.
Are we talking Brazil and Venezuela and Costa
Yes.
Rica?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And we already acquired a book from Mexico, a Mexican author. Actually, no, she's Argentinian. She's Argentinian, but she wrote about a novel about Frida Kahlo. So Yeza acquired that book. So we're definitely looking all around the world, really. Even
What
Spanish
about
novels.
what about poetry, short stories, speculative
Speculative,
fiction?
absolutely. Yes, speculative, absolutely. I think poetry, yes. I think that, but to be clear, the poetry that we're most interested in is platform driven. I try to be really transparent. I think that poetry is really, really hard to break out if someone doesn't already have some kind of a platform. And by that, I mean, they could have an Instagram following, they could have relationships with a lot of organizations and schools. I'm just saying, like, they'd have to have some type of platform in place for us to be able to make those work. But with that caveat, absolutely. I'm actually going to make a bid on a poetry collection this Thursday.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
In
Now,
English
are
and in Spanish.
you,
Yes.
so for the submissions, we're going to get into the submission policy soon, but for the submissions, are you taking books in English and books in Spanish?
Okay, so yeah, let me explain that. And before I get to that, I want to say we do not publish YA, we publish for adults. So I just want to be clear, no children, so no YA. It's just not, we're just an adult publisher. But in terms of, let me see. Okay, in English and in Spanish, I'll speak to that point. The answer is it depends. Not every book will be published simultaneously in English and Spanish, but we are publishing some books in English and some books in Spanish. Depends on where the readers are. We're really trying to be a reader-driven imprint. I want to be really clear about that. And the reason why, folks, is because I've been doing this now for 6 years, and I've seen that when you don't lead with the readers, you could easily end up selling 300 to 500 copies. In fact, it happens all the time. And I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in scaling authors in the most effective way I can, because I want to be around 5 years from now. I want to be around 20 years from now. So with that being said, when we publish in Spanish, we publish in the categories that are popular in Spanish in the United States, or if it's going to be fiction, because fiction doesn't really do very well in the United States, unfortunately, however, in Spanish. But if an author has a relationship with a community in Spanish, then absolutely we will publish that book in Spanish. So for example, if they have a following in Spanish already on social media, if they have some sort of relationship with Spanish language television, there's a woman that published a cookbook that has sold tremendously well that no one's ever heard of because she had an incredible relationship with local Univision that she was able to leverage to help get the word out for the book. So we're really looking for folks that have a means, if we're going to publish them in Spanish, to get the word out for those books, if that makes sense.
Okay. We've gotten a couple of questions about memoirs. Are you doing memoirs?
So that is one of the things that I am not doing. And I'm going to be really clear on that point. I will do a memoir if it is someone who's very well known. I mean, I like to give statistics. I'm different than a lot of editors in that I actually do share the truth about my books and their sales. But I've published about 16 memoirs, and of those 16, 5 of them have been successful, and all 5 of those people were very well known before we published the book. So Maria Hinojosa, I know you all know her.
Of course.
You know, Danny Trejo, I know you know him, right?
Yes, we do.
Centoya Brown was a huge news story when she came out of prison. Nipsey Hussle was a huge news story when he was unfortunately murdered prematurely. His life was cut short, sad, tragically. Those are the more or less the books that I've published. Now there's another 11 there, right? And there's nothing more heartbreaking to me than publishing a memoir and then not being able to break that book out. And then I have to tell someone that their personal story wasn't urgent enough to get media or to get the readership that it deserved. And I've been in that position over and over and over again. I'm in it right now, actually. And I just can't do that anymore. So that's why.
Okay. So, are you taking all submissions, or do they have to be agented?
Okay, so I am taking all submissions, but I will be clear that, you know, agented submissions tend to take a priority because they are they just have more, they're more established in our system. We are able to, they get a much more easy publication process than unagented. With that being said, I am publishing unagented submissions. Actually, next year, I'm publishing a novel called Malinali about Malinche, and it was submitted to me by my personal email a couple of years ago, and that author had sent it around to agents for almost 15 years, and no one had paid any attention to it until I did. I'm super proud and excited to be publishing that book. So I think that it all, you know, I think we do accept unagented submissions, but they think they work best when they have a really unique hook and they are genre. This particular book is sort of a magical realism fantasy retelling of Malinche's story.
Oh, okay, good. So what is the submission policy? How do we submit?
Okay, well, you can submit by sending us an email. I mean, I think that the best way would be to send Norma, who is, and I mentioned previously. So sending it in by email to her is the best way to submit, and I can share her email afterwards to distribute to everybody.
Absolutely. So we can write to Norma, and
Yeah.
it'll start with her.
It'll start
And then
with her.
she'll send it off. Okay. Now,
Yeah.
how many books are you planning to publish per month, per year?
So it's not really about the books that we publish per month. It's more about the books we acquire per year. So we're striving between the 3 of us to acquire 16 books a year and in English, and then 20 books in Spanish, most of which will be previously published either in other countries or there'll be translations. There'll be some original. We are publishing some original Spanish as well, but it's just sort of like a puzzle piece. They come in from all different kinds of ways. But the reason why that number is higher than the English is because a lot of them have been already, you know, sort of published and have already gone through the editorial
They
process.
already have a track record.
They have a track record, or they're just they're already written and edited. So, you know, we can bring them in. They've been self-published. There are people that have self-published their books and have, you know, been able to find an audience, or their translation from English, or their simultaneous English-Spanish, or they're folks that, like I said, there's plenty of folks we're publishing who just have an incredible relationship with the community and a means of speaking to the community. And that's the launch pad for us with Spanish, because Spanish language in the United States, I don't know if people know this, just to put it in context, it sells 1% of English language books in the United States overall as a whole. Like the full total of every book, from a children's book to whatever, is 1% of the volume of English. So it's a tough category, but I'm committed to it anyway, because I think it's important.
Yes, it is very important. Will the books be available, you know, like through, you know, through your website at Barnes and Noble, bookstores, online? How are the books going to be distributed?
Okay, so The books will be distributed, every book that's published, like period, from any publisher in the United States is distributed based on the retailers they're able to buy into that book. So we're not we're not a direct to consumer business in book publishing. We sell to retailers like Amazon or Walmart or Target or, Barnes and Noble, for example. And so, or independent bookstores all around the country. So what we do when we acquire a book and edit it, there's a process that starts with a sales team, and that sales team goes out into the community or into the community of retailers and tries to sell the book into accounts. So the number of books that are bought into those accounts are up to those retailers. So because it's not up to us. So if we are able to get, for example, if we're able to get 10,000 or 20,000 copies out via a retailer, then they will be the ones distributing those books. So Amazon does have, of all the retailers, Amazon is most likely to carry almost every book, but what varies is the quantity, and it's entirely up to them. So what we print is based on what they opt into, if that makes sense.
Okay. Now, is your these people that are selling, your sales team and stuff, will they also be selling to, there are a lot of Latinx owned bookstores now.
Yes.
So
yes.
that's one of your parameters, to sell to them and to reach out directly to those kind of bookstores?
Absolutely, without question. Like they're always going to be front and center of trying to get our books out into the marketplace. But the sad thing is that in general, independent bookstores are contracting a number instead of expanding. And I'm just saying that that's true across the board for any independent bookseller. So thankfully, there is a new wave of independent booksellers that are Latine in different cities, and I keep a list of them. But the lists that we have, it's going to be like less than 50. You know what I mean? It's probably going to be maybe even less than 20. So and if anybody knows of any beyond the ones that I know, please do send me those names. So for me, I really we can't rely on them to get the books out, is what I'm saying. We do market to them believe me, they're the first people on my list that I'm going to send all my books to personally. I often do. But it's not enough to get a book out. We have to get, Amazon's has the biggest market share. And for me, Walmart and Target are really important because that's where our communities go. Most Latino communities don't have a bookseller in their community. I don't know if people knew that, but the majority of them don't even have one bookseller, whether it's Barnes and Noble or an independent bookseller. So most people from our communities are going to see books at places like Walmart or Target. So that's why it's important for me to get into those places too.
Are you going to be showcasing this line at like ALA, BEA Book Expo and those big festivals? Because sometimes we go to those festivals and there's like nothing. There's no Latino books at all and stuff.
Well, that's a great question. I will ask. I'm not ALA. All of that is a different department. Like I'm on the editorial side. That's more on like the sales side. But I can ask them about that. Usually, I'm not.
They should make a splash.
They should.
For you.
I can certainly ask them.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. What else do we want to ask you? Let's look at some of the questions on the chat. I did promise I was going to look.
Yes, there's a lot. Someone did ask me to clarify about the 1% thing, and let me just be super clear about what I meant by that. Sorry. Oh, okay. Well, I'll get to that, and then I'll come back to another question somebody just sent. So I'm talking about the revenue from retail. So if there's, say, $200 million that are sold in books in a given year, there aren't, I'm just using it as an example, then like 2 million of that will be from Spanish language books. That's what I mean. So like the volume overall of books that are sold in Spanish is very, very small compared to what it is in English. That's what I was trying to convey. Is that clear? And I forgot to mention that I'm absolutely publishing a nonfiction as well. I was talking more about the fiction genres, but I publish a lot in nonfiction, and self-help, practical nonfiction is a great category for our communities and for me. I've been wellness and health are incredible categories. Anything around personal well-being, narrative nonfiction, stories that have, hidden histories are really important for me as well. There's a vast array of different categories that I publish in nonfiction. I just wanted to say that part.
So one of the questions from Irene is, what do you consider a successful book from the publisher's perspective?
Well, from the publisher's perspective, a successful book is a profitable book. Just to be very, very clear. So it's a book that is, well, it's a couple of things, right? It's a book that you've been able to effectively get the book distributed, right? That's the first thing. So what I mean is by that is being able to get the accounts like Target, Walmart, Amazon, whatever, to take a decent number. That's the first metric of success. I think then the next one is to be able to get, for me, it's to be able to have impact with a publication. It's like an impact can be defined in a few different ways. It's sales, obviously, but it's also media coverage or awards. Like that matters too. So if there's a book that maybe didn't sell as well, but it made a big splash within the industry, there was a lot of coverage of it, people found out about it, then I would view that as successful because it's not just the author's success, it's my success. It's my success at being able to get that book out in front of people in a powerful way.
Okay. Just while we're on that topic, because sometimes, for these big industry awards, that like the American Publishing Awards and the National Book Awards and, the Pulitzer and stuff, an author cannot enter. It has to be the publisher.
Yes.
So will
yes.
you be entering some of yours?
Oh,
some of
yeah.
your
I
authors?
enter my books all the time. I mean, of course,
Enter all of them.
I mean, the ones that are eligible, like not every category is eligible. Each award has its own metrics for what makes a book eligible, right? But if my books are eligible, you better believe I'm going to be submitting them for awards. I submit them all for awards.
Very good. Very good.
Yes, the International Latino Book Awards as well.
Yes,
For
definitely
sure.
those. Amina Ali wants to know, Latino writers have difficult time finding agents.
Yes.
Because, there are not a lot of Latino agents, and sometimes the regular agents don't understand the Latino culture. So, I mean, what tips would you give, Latino authors about finding an agent?
Yes, absolutely. So I strongly believe that the best way to find an agent is to read a lot of books within the category that you want to publish in. I'm a big believer in this myself. I did it when I published my own books, and it worked really well for me. And I still do it to this day. The same thing is that when I want to publish any book, any given book, I always look to a book that's existing, a recent one that's been successful in that category. And by a Latino author, Latina author, I'll see, okay, if, for example, in the magical realism fiction space, I look at how did The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina break out? So that's one that I look at all the time. So I'm always looking at sort of an example. So when I look at those examples, the other thing I do is I read the acknowledgments. So reading the acknowledgments of those books, doing a deep dive. If you're an author that is aspiring to be published, and let's say you've already written your book or you've already got a good chunk of it done, because I do think that you have to focus on the book first, right? But let's say if you've got the book done and now you're like, how can I find representation? What I would recommend there is looking through the category that you would love to see your book next to. Like what authors are there that are, because so many books get published, my gosh. And that includes self-published books too. Not them because they wouldn't have agents, sorry. But I just mean that's more in terms of marketing. But in terms of finding an agent, the beautiful thing is that now there are so many books that have been published in every category that do have Latino authors. Like you can find incredible sci-fi Latino authors. You can find incredible romance authors. In every category, there are Latinos now. So I would say you go in and you look at the acknowledgments and you see what agents are being thanked time and time again, especially for recognizing me when nobody else ever did before. I always look for that language, right? Because that means that there was people that were open to debut. And I know there's a lot of agents, a lot of new agents that are Latine that are really eager to find writers. And they will say every agent has a page that you can look up and they'll tell you exactly what they're looking for. So I would consider that carefully also.
Karen Gonzalez wants to know about cookbooks. Are you going to do any cookbooks?
Um, the jury's out on that one. I guess I'm I'm a little I'm open to being convinced on cookbooks. For just a lot of logistical reasons, they can be very, very expensive to produce. I'm a little reluctant about them right now. But I would say the door is sort of halfway open on that one. If there's one that's really, really incredible, I could be convinced.
Okay, you can be convinced.
Yeah.
Teresa Carvajal wants to know about how to get books in front of college and university professors, because now there's a whole thing where Latin American, not so much Latin American, but Latin studies, literature, Latin literature is being taught in schools, in high schools and in colleges. They're few and far between, but they're there.
Yeah, no, I mean, so colleges and university, it's funny you should ask that because I'm gonna give you an answer. I'll give you two answers. I'll give you the official answer and I'll give you the Michelle answer. So the Michelle answer, what I did back when I published my own book, which I was able to get course adopted in 20 universities, is I actually went kind of door to door. Like I traveled, and I know this is very expensive and inefficient and not cognizant of social media and even electronics in any way, but it's very old school, but it actually did work for me. I made appointments with Latino college professors across the United States, and now they could be Zooms, right? Like you don't have to get into an old car to drive around the United States to do this now, but the way that I did. But I think that college professors really want to be tapped, actually. That was my experience when I did it myself. And I think that if you're an existing author, that's what I'm assuming, right? That is hoping to get their work in front of them. And maybe their publisher hasn't been very successful or very supportive in that effort. I would say make those calls yourself because they are desperate to find more books that they can incorporate in their curriculum. And I found them to be very open. And it's not hard you can just look into any like Hispanic studies departments or even literature or women's studies. I know it sounds long and tedious, but it's going to be much more effective than relying on your publisher because they're going to do blanket mailings. They're not going to do individual notes to professors that happen to be Latino. So there's a big difference in actually making a handwritten note and reaching out to somebody, I believe.
Yes. Lupita Gonzalez has
Hi, Lupita. Hi, friend.
so she says, you explained that book sales were decreasing before the pandemic.
Yes.
And if she remembers correctly, that there is an increase now. So
Well, there was an increase in the pandemic, yes.
During the pandemic. Okay. So she's curious about what you see as the baseline from which you wish to improve upon. What is your vision, your goal in this new role and capacity?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you for that question. It's a great question. So just to be, again, transparency, sales did go up a lot during the pandemic, but when the pandemic ended, they went down again. So because people got busy. I mean, people didn't have anything to do during the pandemic, but now you're still competing with people you're competing for people's attention with every other medium of entertainment. You're competing with TikTok, you're competing with the TV, you're competing with movies, you're competing with a lot to get someone's attention for a book. So that's why book sales are always going to be, fluctuate a lot and be a little bit, challenging sometimes. But my vision and what I've witnessed with my own eyes that I think is really freaking magical is that, when you remove the barriers of entry to actually finding out about books and then directly purchasing books, the sales go up exponentially. And what I mean by, well, I'll be really concrete about what I'm talking about. For example, my first author that I've published for Primero Sueño Press, Kayla Shaheen, sold 1 million copies of her book by herself on TikTok via direct sales on TikTok Shop. So the fact that people could swipe directly and buy the book, I think made a big difference for her. I mean, obviously, and it still is, because we now have our own TikTok shop at Simon and Schuster that we're selling her books
Oh,
through. And also obviously we're selling them through every avenue. But my goal is to create those direct opportunities for the community to find out about books and in the same place be able to purchase the books. And so I'm trying to find partners out there that are already selling different products for Latinos digitally, where books distribution can be connected to them at scale, because I feel like that would really remove a lot of barriers. Then you don't have to have a local bookstore. You don't have to have all of something that you have to pay rent for to get to it. That's just one of my many goals, is just to remove any barrier of entry to be able to both find out about and purchase a book. And I think that obviously social media, digital media, e-commerce, and I mean, there's a lot of different avenues, community organizations, even evangelical organizations. There's a lot of different ways that our communities convene. And I'm trying to find a way to get the books directly to them instead of making them have to come to us.
okay. We have another question, this one about, again, from Karen, about libraries. How are you going to reach out to libraries?
Well, libraries are very much a part of Simon & Schuster's publishing program, and they have incredible relationships with libraries all around the country, and they're always looking for more.
Do you know of the Reforma librarians?
I don't know specifically, but I'm going to take note of that and ask my people in-house if they know of them. But tell me more about, I don't know.
Reforma, I don't know if Tess is on, but Reforma is, it's basically librarians in the, librarians, and they are specifically for not so much the Latino, but for the Spanish market. So they, they have workshops in Spanish. They promote books in Spanish. So they have English and Spanish at their library. So they do a whole program. They're the ones who do the Pura Belpre Award.
Fantastic.
Yes, I mean, you're not doing children's books or YA, but but Reforma is a very strong group nationwide, and they cater to the Spanish market. So they might be a good one for you. I'll introduce you to Tess, and then you guys can talk.
Absolutely. I mean, that's very much what I want to do. Like, I'm keeping a database of all of organizations that do specific advocacy for Latine books, because I feel like, that's part of that missing link, right? That's part of that bridge that I'm trying to create. Like, I want to have an organic relationship with every aspect of publishing, whether it's independent booksellers, specific libraries, anyone who congregates around the idea of reading and loving books for Latinos in the United States and even around the world. I would like to be connected to. That is my goal.
Yes. Well, Las Comadres has a Las Comadres and Friends book club. Okay.
Yes.
It's 17 years old, going strong.
Yes.
And, and that's what we do. We promote books, we read them.
Yes.
We usually do 2, if not 3 a month. So, so we're, we are ready for your books. And then Latinx in publishing, which is our other host, they also do, they promote a lot of authors. We have the newsletter that promotes the books of the month, or they do cover reveals. They do, they give like platforms, access to authors and everything. We're trying to also do for people who, because not everybody wants to be a writer. Some people want to be the editor. Some people want to be a publicist. Some people want to be, be part of that marketing team. So we also, one of the things that Latinx in Publishing does is trying to find those people and, encourage them, show them job listings and stuff, and get people, more of our Hispanic and Latinx people into the publishing industry. Because, you know, if we're not in it, we're not going to be able to make the decisions.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I think that's incredible. I mean, as I told you, I wouldn't have a writing career if it weren't for Las Comadres. The specific support of Las Comadres launched my own book 20 years ago. So I am fully aware and really, really excited that you've expanded so much in your reach for book lovers and every aspect of the industry, because I do think it is important. It's important for us to remove, like I'm going to keep saying it over and over again, but there's so many barriers to entry to our industry. It's unbelievable. I mean, the number of people working in this industry went down in the last 5 years, not up. Like it used to be 7 or 8%, and now it's 5%, because it's so difficult, because there's so many challenges and so many people that don't get it, you know? I mean, I have to hit my own head against the wall at least 10 times a day, believe me, trying to explain things over and over and over again. But it's my dream, of course, to see, you know, many, many different publishers of imprints and other initiatives that do Latine publishing. I think that it's going to take all of us. My little imprint isn't going to be the one that changes everything. This is just one drop in a really big ocean.
Yep. It could be the first drop.
I hope so.
All right. So let's talk money. Can we talk money?
Sure.
Is there like a range? You know, what are you paying and how are you, you know, is it like, am I going to get a big advance? And then after the book comes out, you know, you do the royalties, or how does that work?
Yeah, so well, I can give you, I mean, every book is very, very different, but I can give you some general parameters. First of all, I will say an agent will take 15%. That's standard. So if you are agented, there, you know, that's just something you have to take into consideration. But once you get to a publisher, typically the way it works is there's an advance, and the advance will be determined by a few different factors. It'll be determined on how many copies a publisher thinks they can sell of your book. That's just standard across the board. If they have a vision for breaking the book out, for how they can get it, you know, in front of the right audiences and how they can get to a certain level of sales, then the advance will be commensurate upon that, because an advance by definition is an advance against royalties. So that means that royalties are a certain percentage of the profit of a book. So, you know, they're different for, I mean, I think they're usually for hardcovers, they tend to be between, depending on the publisher you're working with, they'll range somewhere between like 10 to 15% for the hardcover. And usually it's in pieces, like the first 5,000 copies will be like 10 and a half or something. And then, you know, the second 5,000 will be, I mean, I don't have them in front. I have to look at them every time, but like, it'll be like 12, you know, and then eventually it'll be 15% of the profits will be the royalties. So that advance is basically meant to be like, this is how much we think you're going to be able to make in royalties in the long term. So we have to determine that based on a lot of different factors, sales being one of them, but, you know, what the ability to win certain, you know, the level of cachet that an author has, and maybe they'll be able to bring, you know, a big award to the table. That's how some publishers think. That's actually not how I value things. I'm just trying to give a big picture because I'm not the only publisher in the world. I just want people to know how different publishers think. I tend to think on the impact that the book can make, and I tend to gauge advances on how many, you know, how many copies I think I can sell and how much royalty income I think we'll make in the long term. So I would say that what that looks like concretely is, you know, it depends on whether an author's a first-time author versus an author that's on their mid-career. So if they're in their mid-career, then one would look at their sales track and what they've earned previously. If they're a debut author, then it's sort of, how does this fit within the genre we're publishing in, or within the world, the platform that they have in the nonfiction space, to determine how much we can pay. But I mean, I've paid advances ranging from, you know, $40,000, $50,000 to $5 million. That just shows you how wide the range can be.
I'll take the 5 million.
Right. Well, we have a
Um,
platform. Maybe.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Literacy all the way. We've gotten a couple of questions about, can you talk about the copyright of the book?
The copyright.
If does the author get to keep her rights?
Yes, they almost always, yes, always the copyright is the author. But actually, most authors these days are opting to make their copyright a business, like an LLC. So they'll be like, I don't know, I'd be like MHM Incorporated or something. So for business reasons, they'll often copyright to, I mean, it's happened in the last 5 contracts I've signed, so it seems to be a trend among authors. But yes, they would be the author that always has the copyright of their book. But what we sell are the rights to publish books in certain territories. So, for example, while the author owns the copyright, if they're selling, the rights to publish in the United States and Canada, for example, then those rights will belong to the publisher. But then they retain the rights for any other territory,
Okay.
depending
And
on
now
the.
are you doing because I know some of the things, I don't know if you're even looking at, are you doing audiobooks? Will you be
Yes.
doing and what about, will you be retaining the rights for, if people want to do some books, thank God, are movie worthy and
Yes.
stuff. So, is that also, I mean, not right away for every book, but maybe one or two you would throw into the mix to be a movie or something?
Well, right. No, that's a good question. So typically, the way that works, so what most publishers will buy when they buy the right to publish a book in a given territory will be all platforms. So that means audio, ebook, hardcover, or paperback, depending on whether the publisher chooses to publish it in paperback or not. It sort of depends. But audio, it's pretty much a given that if the audio isn't already gone, like there's some self-published authors that have already produced an audiobook themselves, or maybe they've sold it to Audible or something like that. And in those cases, we'll carve it out. But most of the time, we really want the audio. I'll just say that. And that's standard across the industry is that we're going to publish the audio because audio
Okay.
is the only part of the industry that's growing, actually.
Yes, yes. I'm amazed at how many of my friends are doing the audiobook. I tried it, but I don't think I'm listening correctly because I don't get it.
Okay.
Um, so
Oh, sorry, I didn't answer the question about the movie. Let me get to that. So
yes, the movie,
on the movie
film
piece,
rights.
yeah, film rights, a publisher will never have film rights. The author will have the film rights, and an agent will then market those out to the film industry. But it's pretty standard, and an agent will right away say, "Oh no, no publisher's getting the film rights," because an agent wants the author to retain them so that they can make the profit
So
when it gets sold to a studio. Yes,
yes, yes. You want to knock on Hallmark's door. Hallmark is making movies all the time.
exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, so my semi-last question is, how can organizations like Las Comadres para las Americas and Latinx in Publishing help you, help Primero Sueño Press and your authors? How can we help you?
Well, thank you for the question. So many ways. I
We
would
want you to
say
thrive. We want your authors to thrive. So what can we do?
thank you so much. So I would say that what any organization can do, it depends on, I'll talk about this organization and then I'll say in general. This organization, I think, can really help by choosing our books for the book club, which I know there's a lot of books you have to choose from, but I will send them to you all for consideration. I think also even having programs with authors that are nonfiction, it doesn't have to be book club. They could give a program that's related to their book. I think I mean, interestingly enough, what a lot of people don't realize is that reviews and media coverage and all that stuff doesn't sell books the way it used to. You know what really sells books more than anything? Podcasts. Podcasts, and social media and TikTok sell books dramatically more than anything else. So if there's any opportunity to do an interview with an author that is, in front of an audience that are book lovers that really care about that specific subject, that is a really, really helpful thing. Obviously, book clubs, super helpful. And, bulk buys of books whenever, if it's an organization like a not-for-profit, is extremely helpful. I would say also just any individual, if you love a book, post a video about it on whatever you're on, whether you're on TikTok or you're on Instagram. That stuff really makes a difference. You have no idea. Even if you have 12 followers, the chances that those 12 people will care is kind of sometimes even higher chances that people will care if you publish in the New York Times. Because a lot of times people look at things in the New York Times or the Atlantic or wherever. I've had authors that have been featured like 5 times in the New York Times and sold almost nothing of their books. Well, I've had others that got almost zero media coverage. Like people like Kayla, I love to talk about her because boy, she got very few articles when she was just a 20-something selling directly on TikTok, but she sold 1 million copies by herself without any coverage. So that just goes to show you that the power is in our hands, right? I'll talk about some Spanish language authors that I think are incredible. There's a man named Daniel Aviv who sold 100,000 copies of his book in Spanish in the United States alone. That is a huge number. The only other person that's reached that number is Jenny Rivera, by the way.
Yes.
It's in like the last 50 years of publishing. And he did it just by making videos about his ideas and his beliefs and speaking from the heart, all in Spanish. And, he sells pretty well in Latin America too. But he did a tour also of the United States, and he just sold them at events. And I find that really inspirational. There's a poet that sold a book called Valentia. He's totally independently published, and he's just sells and sells and sells his poetry. And it's because of the organic connection he has to his community. So I feel like building any organization that can help us create that organic connection to our community in any way, we're wide open to that, and we deeply appreciate it.
Beautiful. Yes, we're here for you. Is there anything that you want to share with us before we finish for the evening?
Let me just see. I'm just sort of scrolling through.
Mhm.
Make sure I didn't miss any questions. It looks like I probably got most of them.
Yep. We talked about the festivals and the competitions and the contests.
Yes, I would just say this is such a special, precious community to me. I really care deeply about everyone here. And I would just say keep writing, keep reading, keep talking about books. No matter how anybody can say anything about, they said radio was dead, right? And then look what happened. Podcasts. No, I'm serious. I mean, people can say all kinds of dark things about books and publishing, but I really do believe in this first dream that we're going to build this all together, all of us. It's going to take literally everybody to build this, but it takes creating demand among young people. It takes making sure unfortunately, it's just not my division, children's and YA, but I really believe in it and I really support it. And I believe in just creating opportunities for young people to fall in love with books so that we still have books 100 years from now. And continuing to center it in your lives whenever you can, to talk to your friends about books that you love, to buy new authors. That's like I would end with that, because the vast majority of books that are purchased in general are old books. Like it's like 85% backlist now, which when I first started writing, it was 50%. So it keeps getting sort of worse and worse. By the time somebody wants to buy a book, they have to have heard about it like 10 times or something, or it's Gabriel Garcia Marquez or Isabel Allende, but buy a new writer, buy somebody that just is starting out, that they really need that support, especially our Latine authors out there. So I guess that's what I would end with, unless there's any other questions.
Thank you. Well, they want you to put down Norma's email.
Yes, Norma's
because they want to start submitting tonight.
Yes, absolutely. I will. Okay, let me just, you know what? Maybe I will type it. I'm like, can I get, my chat isn't working right now. If I can't seem to get it.
Tell me what it is. What is it?
Yes.
Norma?
It's Norma.Perez Hernandez at Simon & Schuster. I'm going to go into my email to make sure I didn't say that wrong. Hold on.
Is Simon & Schuster all spelled out?
Yes. A-N-D. Yes, that's correct.
All right,
Norma.
look and see if
Bettis.
I spelled it correctly.
Yes, and there are, yeah, it's Norma, Norma dot Perez, Perezhernan. Oh, yeah, you wrote it right there. Yes, exactly right. So that's correct. And then in terms of what to submit when you're submitting, I think someone asked that before, right? Well, if they didn't, I'll just tell you anyway.
Yes.
I think if it's a fiction project, it's pretty important to send the whole book. Especially if you're a first-time author. It's just better for everybody involved if we get the whole book, because that means that we can, like, the less of the book we have, the less money we can offer. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
So we need the whole novel, if it's a novel. Short stories are pretty tough. I wouldn't say that, although we have published them on occasion, but I'd say that's probably the toughest of all the genres within fiction, to be honest. But otherwise, novels are the place to be, I would say. In terms of nonfiction, a proposal. And a proposal should have probably, I mean, if you don't have an agent, I won't go on and on about it, but I would say that they should have some sort of overview, a little bit of a market overview, a comparative titles that you see your book aligned with, like perhaps within the last 2 years, a chapter summaries of all the chapters, and a sample, like a chapter from the book. That's like the rough picture of what a nonfiction proposal should look like.
Okay. And for the fiction submissions, is it a PDF or a Word document? Does it matter?
I don't think it
Doesn't
matters.
matter? Okay.
But you can
And
do it.
how long does it take? You know, I mean, I'm
Yes.
going to get a little thing that says, yes, I have received your manuscript, but then how long does it take from Norma to receive to one of you to say, we've read it and we're interested, or, you know, send me more or something?
I can't give you an exact amount of time because it kind of depends on a lot of things that are going on, but we generally try to get back to folks within a month. That's what we try to get back to folks. So that's like our aim to do so. But yes, that's what I would say there. What else was I going to say? Oh, because you were saying something right before that. Sorry.
About the response time?
Oh, the response time, yes. Oh, I thought you were going to ask me how long it takes to actually publish the book. Sorry. No, response
Well,
time.
if I sell my book to you today, when
Yes.
is my book hitting the bookshelves?
Probably about 2 years from now, I would say, because there's an editing process that has to happen, and then there's a setup process. So a lot of writers are really hot out the gate to want to get their books out. But it's actually not a good idea, especially for fiction, because in order to lay the groundwork, especially for retailers, remember what I said before about retailers, they're really tough to get to the table. So you need time to build support within the team, and then to start sending all those copies out and start telling people and all that kind of stuff. It takes a while. So by the time the book is edited and completed, everything done, the cover, the story, all that kind of stuff, from that point forward, it's about a year to do the building process to publication. So the marketing and publicity plan alone is about 6 months before the book. And you want that because the last thing you want to do is come out to no impact. You know what I mean? And it takes a long time to build an impact for a book.
Okay. So have you already bought your 16 books for the year?
I have certainly not bought my 16 books of the year. No, I don't buy 16. It's between the three of us. So each of us, you know what I mean? Like Norma, me, and Yeza combined have to buy 16 books this year.
No, but that's what I'm saying. So do you guys already have like?
We don't at all. We do
So
not.
you're still buying for this year?
Yes, absolutely. We are. And I would really recommend that you ask Norma and Yeza for their wish lists, because they both have specific wish lists of what they want. I have one too, because I think it would be really helpful in terms of knowing what their tastes are and what they kind of want to publish. Because they have full autonomy about what they want. They have to want to publish whatever book they want to do. So So they can, I
Oh,
don't have,
okay.
it's a sheet of paper. I don't have it memorized, but you can ask them, you can write them directly and they will send it to you.
Okay. And
Yes,
what is Jessa's full name?
her name is Yesanira Venecia.
Oh my goodness.
Venecia. But she goes by Yeza.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for being here with us tonight. It was great seeing you again, chatting with you,
You
discovering your primer sueño, our
too.
primer sueño as well.
Yeah.
And yes, we wish you the very, very best of luck. And we're going to have you and Norma and Jessa come back, in a couple of months to
Yeah.
figure out, where you are. We want a progress report.
Yes, absolutely. And I will invite them to come. I'm sure they'd love to.
Yes, yes. All right, everyone. Thank you. Again, Las Comadres para las Americas and Latinx in Publishing want to thank Michelle for being here with us and for sharing her Primero Sueño Press with us. We're very excited on all accounts. All
Absolutely.
right, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.